Hello, I'm a fiction reviewer. Why am I wearing a mask, you ask? Because I'm going to be reviewing an X-Men fanfiction. Now, before I start, I want to get this known now. I will not only be reviewing fanfiction. I will also review original fiction from things like Fiction Press or other things that you can find on the web. This is being filmed on my phone, and I can't edit, even if it were on a webcam. My webcam is broken, so if you will notice, I'm going to be reading off of my laptop and be recording with my phone. This is the first review I've ever done, and I might not be as entertaining as fanfiction critic a fanfiction critic, AFC, also known as Lindsay, or FFC, and Susan and all of that, because I don't have a gimmick like they do. FFC has Susan and all of her other characters, like early on with Crappy Arthur. I miss them. And AFC has Diane. And I seem to just be going on about other fiction critics, or fanfic critics. So, I'll get to the story. The story is called Everybody Talks. It is on fanfiction.net. It is rated Fiction M. It's English. It's in English because I don't speak any other language. Well, not fluently, or even enough to call it broken. The pairing is Rogue and Gambit. I hear it's called Romy. It's under 3,000 words. I will not read anything over 10,000. There are 17 reviews, 20 faves, 5 follows, and it is complete. I was told that this is one of their that this isn't one of their better stories. So I'll try to be lenient based on that knowledge. Sorry if I take a while or anything, or don't look directly at the camera. Not my fault. Author's note. This reads like it is a part of a bigger story, but it's just a one-shot. It got stuck in my head while I was trying to work through writer's block for another story, so I just had to write it. Everybody Talks. Rogue sighed deeply, feeling completely sated. She stretched her arms out far above her head and groaned as her tired limbs protested. She wiggled her hips experimentally, feeling a sort of satisfying soreness there. Rolling onto her left side, she gazed at the man sitting tall next to her, his well-muscled, shirtless body resting against the wooden headboard, looking just as satisfied as she. One hand rested on his hip, barely concealed by a thin sheet, smoke trailing from a lit cigarette that rested between his index and middle finger. Lazily, he lifted the cigarette to his lips and took a drag. She watched as her companion's head turned towards her, auburn hair hanging haphazardly around his face. It hung just slightly past his chin now, just long enough so that he could pull it into a small ponytail at the nape of his neck. At the nape of neck. Okay, they left out a word there that should say at the nape of his neck. A small 1.5-inch ponytail of his glorious, thick hair. She'd mentioned to him once that she had liked him growing his hair out. That she had liked him growing his hair out. And once it hit that spot below his chin, he kept it there. He liked giving her something she could run her long, delicate fingers through. He liked that one of the first things she always did when they got together was pull the small tie away from his neck and run her hands up the roots of his hair. As he lifted the cigarette to his lips for another drag, he looked around the cheap motel room. The ceiling lamp was obviously weak, and it kept the room bathed in a kind of low-light, seedy glow. The carpet hadn't looked that clean, but the bed did, which was really all that mattered. The large wooden headboard had been nice, too, as it gave the woman next to him something to hold on to. She yawned, pulling herself into a semi-reclining position, as she also pulled herself up against the headboard. Sorry, didn't mean to fall asleep on you. If she has an accent, I wouldn't know. I've never really paid much attention to the X-Men movies. I feel bad about saying that, because I like to think that I like them, but I never watched them through and through. Except for that one with the young Dr. X, or Professor X, I mean. Oops, Dr. X is probably something completely different. Did I mention the author? Oh, I'm bad at this. The author is ColorCoated. They only write Romy fics, I hear. And by here I mean see, because I've already looked at their channel. This is the first time I'm reading this story, too, so bear with me. Alright, where was I? This is highly unprofessional. But then again, I'm not a professional, because I'm not getting paid. She had apparently been sleeping in his pale, pink, $600 dress shirt. Fucking expensive shirt, if you ask me. $600 for a shirt. I don't know how much this one cost, but I can tell you, it's probably nowhere near even $100. You could buy me with that kind of money. The shirt was rumpled on her body and buttoned dangerously low, leaving the top 4 buttons undone. It smelled like him. It was delicious. He smirked. "It's all right, Cher. Remy just figure he wore you out." He had good reason to think so. 6 times was a record for her. He may have been just a little proud of himself. I assume 6 times meant orgasms. Goodness. And, I'm assuming that Remy has a Louisiana accent, because apparently he's from the South. I should have done a little research on the characters before I started reading, but this is a spur-of-the-moment kind of thing. Alright. And I'm sorry it looks so dark. I don't have the light on. Her grin matched his. Guess you might have reason to think that. She reached an arm towards his and slowly pulled the cigarette away from his lips, sitting up fully now, her position matching his own. She leaned towards him and pressed a quick, wet, open-mouthed kiss against his lips. Then she brought the cigarette up to her lips and took a deep, tasty drag. This author is trying to be really descriptive, I notice, with the tastes and stuff. I'm not going to say that they're doing a bad job of it. It's just, in some parts it feels kind of forced. I should save all this for the end, sorry. He watched with hunger in his eyes. Got my nicotine cravings again, Cher. Is that in French? Chérie? I think so. I think that was meant to be like chérie, French for dear, darling, something like that. Another drag. Every time, Remy. Every time. Pursing her lips, she expertly exhaled the smoke. His eyes darkened and his head tilted slightly as he watched her. "And you know how hot you look when you've got my smokes?" I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to try to do accents. The evidence of his words was more than apparent, seeing as the only thing covering his midsection was a thin white sheet. He has a boner, if you can't tell. She gave a sort of happy sigh and small chuckle. Know that it's so bad for me." What? No, as in I know that it's so bad for me. Okay. But it always makes you look at me in that way, so I just can't help myself. So unbelievably hot. His voice was a whisper. I said I'm not saying it like they are. As his eyes stayed on the cigarette at her lips, he couldn't seem to pull his eyes away. As she held the cigarette out to him, he quickly grabbed it, not able to bring his mouth to where her lips had been fast enough. He took a drag. She looked around at the crappy ceiling lamp. "It's not the best place we've been, is it?" He chuckled, still smoking. "It's not the worst." She cocked an eyebrow. "And what are you smiling about?" He grinned. "Just thinking about that time in the alley behind that nightclub a couple of weeks ago." Okay, I'm going to make a comment right here. I'm guilty of doing this in other mediums, but don't write the accent. It can slow the flow of the story down tremendously. But that might just be for me, because I have trouble with my words. Just a little. Alright. Ha! She tried to give him a flat look, but the upward curving of her lips ruined it. "I had scrapes on my back for weeks." His smile grew as the memory of it replayed in his mind. Not able to make it back to his apartment, he had literally ripped the tight black top off of Rogue's body. The surprised look on her face and the look of her heated skin, as she stood half naked in front of him in the alley, with only a lace bra and black miniskirt on, it was too much. Quickly, his hand was up her skirt and he tore her panties off too. His hands had slid down to her thighs, and, gripping them tightly, he had lifted her off the ground and wrapped them around his waist. Forgetting to be gentle, he had slammed her lithe body against the brick behind him, and had his way with her, quickly bringing them both to completion. Gee, as AFC would say, show, don't tell. Even though I don't really want to read about that. But this is just a story meant to break writer's block, so... If I remember correctly, you had been begging me to take you. I was just doing the right thing and giving you what you wanted. Oh, and that dialogue is in the same paragraph as the flashback, I guess. That should be in its own paragraph. I assume that they know this by now. I'm bad at this. I really am. But I'm trying. He snubbed the butt of his cigarette into the ashtray. It's ashtray, I think is what they were going for. And if it was, I believe that ashtray is one word, not two. On the nightstand next to him, she shivered, unable to tease him back as she knew his words were true. It was all that dancing. Who knew you could move your body like that? He was still grinning. You should have some idea. He winked. You've seen moi do move like that plenty of other times. Unable to help herself, she giggled. That was a good night, though. He was still thinking about it. Where was it? Alright. She grinned. It sure was. She leaned over his body, her covered chest bumping against his, and reached for the red and white package on the nightstand. Expertly sliding out another cigarette, she brought the Marlboro up to her lips. You'd think I'd be able to say that word. My family smokes. I should know how to say Marlboro. We say it weird, though. We're like Marlboros. We say it differently every time. It's weird. It's a weird word. Wordlessly, he placed his finger at the tip and watched as she inhaled when he gave her the light. Man, Remy, she blew smoke in the opposite direction. It is unbelievable how much you crave these things, how much you want them. Not half as much as I crave you, Cher. He said. I added in. She smiled. It was a romantic thing for him to say, even if it was true. I guess it's romantic. And wait. It was a romantic thing for him to say, even if it was true. Even if it wasn't true, you mean? Yeah, that would make a lot more sense. Because if it is true and he's saying it, then it's romantic. No matter what. Alright, I think I might be thinking too much on this, but it's a little confusing. He took the cigarette from her and took a long drag before passing it back and watching intently as she placed it between her red lips. You know, Remy, she looked straight at him, these things are terrible for you. He nodded distractedly. God, I'm not even halfway through. Much too focused on the way her lips pursed slightly as she exhaled smoke. He wanted to kiss those lips until they bruised. I know, Cher. I think you should quit. She took a couple more drags as she watched the surprise show on his face. That was unexpected. He took the offered cigarette from her and looked at her curiously. You think so? She nodded. I really do. He looked unsurely at the Marlboro in his hand, and then snuffed it out in the ashtray. They said ashtray again. This is gonna be a problem for me, if they keep saying ashtray. Anyways, I guess I could try. She smiled. I'd appreciate it. He smiled at her, eyes drawn to his dress shirt that she was wearing. He focused on the deep V there, left from so many open buttons, making her cleavage very visible. Alright. She looked around for her phone or a clock. What time is it? He shook his head. Don't worry about it. We still got plenty of time. She grinned to herself. It was easy to lose track of time when you spent the last half hour beneath Remy LeBeau. Do you have to go back tonight? He knew she wouldn't stay, but couldn't seem to stop himself from asking anyway. They said stop himself for asking anyway, and that's not right. It should be from asking anyway. You know I do. Je sais. He nodded. Speaking of which, how's that boyfriend of yours anyway? Gus? She shrugged. He's alright, I guess. You know me. I like having someone to come home to. Remy gave her a knowing look and couldn't help himself from smirking slightly. The sex hasn't gotten any better, has it? She groaned and rolled her eyes, slouching down against the headboard. Not at all. He nudged her good-naturedly with his elbow. Why don't you just tell him that you like it rough? She sighed. I tried. He just doesn't seem to get it. Remy trailed one fingertip down her arm. He's too gentle with you. If I recall, you like that too sometimes. He could recall a few token times when it had been more slow and languid, as opposed to most of the time when he just pounded into her with abandon. I must not be very comfortable. It's not like he could help it. She'd purse those red little lips and would groan harder, harder, over and over. It was a gentlemanly thing of him to do, to agree with her requests. Not to mention the fact that rough sex was obscenely hot and her body seemed to match his like a depraved puzzle piece. You're welcome for the images, by the way. Yeah, with you, she exclaimed, giving him a heated glance. Only with you. She gave a sort of happy sigh. Remy, only you know how to play with my body like that. Then she shivered at the memory. He grinned, using a hand to tuck a chunk of white hair behind her ear. And how does Gus feel about you cheating on him, Chick? Now, I know I don't know much about the X-Men universe, but isn't Rogue's touch lethal? Like, if she touches you, you die kind of thing? Or am I thinking of someone else, or is that different in the comic book universe or something? The only X-Men movie that I've ever seen with Rogue in it was like the very first one that they ever made, or maybe it was like the second or third, I don't remember. But I know that was a pretty angsty thing for Rogue. She always wore gloves because she was scared of killing people. Is that not the case here? You know what? Let's just finish the story. She gave a humorless laugh and shook her head. You know, it's funny, Remy. I know it's wrong, and I shouldn't be doing it, but most of the time, I feel like I'm cheating on you with him, not the other way around. He nodded. I do hate the idea of his hands on you. She nodded. I know. He continued. And we have been at this for a long time. She smiled softly. Almost 3 years now. He nodded again. Well, what about Ginny? How does she feel about us sleeping together? He gave a half shrug. Never told her we'd be exclusive. But she's not sleeping with anyone else. So, he countered her statement with a strange look. She sighed. Remy, it's not just about the sex. Mind-blowing, he interjected. She couldn't fight the little smirk. She reached over and absently placed her hand on his forearm. See, like that, right there. I thought she had to kill it. I'm not an expert on the Marvel Universe, so... Yeah, Marvel. This is Marvel. It's not just about the mind-blowing, incredible, fantastic sex, is it? He gave her the same smile that tried to be reassuring, but was a little sad. They'd had this conversation many times before. Cher, you know it's not. Every time I say that, I think of the singer. I just imagine him in burlesque, telling that to Cher, you know. It's kind of funny. I know. She just couldn't help but ask. He leaned over to pull up the edge of his dress shirt, dragging it up past her thigh, directly to the left of her hip bone. He could see the dark ink tattooed there, about 1.5 inches high, stood a very prominent letter R. He wouldn't have done that if it was. Marking her. Damn. She smiled, ridiculously happy about her and Remy's little secret. She'd done it well over a year and a half ago, but it still excited her every time she thought about it. As Remy had leaned over, the sheet on his lap slid dangerously low, now barely concealing anything. Tattooed inside of his